In late August 1804, the expedition of Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to the New American West approached the then largely unknown northern region, vaguely referred to by Easterners as the lands of the Dakotas, or the Dakota Territory. The territory of Dakota was designated an incorporated territory of the United States in March 1861 and remained so until November 2, 1889. The Missouri River, with its notable twists, turns, floating logs, and sandbars, leaned more westerly than northerly as the party of more than 40 men approached the vicinity of the Niobrara River confluence at the present-day boundary between Nebraska and South Dakota. The Yangton band of Sioux Indians were reportedly nearby. The French called the river L'eau de Court, the river that rushes. Now the river's name derives from the Ponca name Niobrara, or broad water. Sergeant Ordway observed that, quote, the water shoots in the Missouri very swift and has thrown the sand out, which makes a sandbar and shoals from the mouth a considerable distance. Clark determined that the river was, quote, non-navigable for even canoes without great difficulty. Like the Platte further south, the Niobrara flows from the interior sandhills region of western Nebraska, a harshland of rolling semi-barren wasteland, home to rattlesnake dens and stopover for massive seasonal bird migrations. Ponca families farmed in the bottomlands of the Niobrara, growing corn, squash, pumpkins, until at least their removal to reservations in Kansas and Oklahoma. The expedition captains had sent John Shields and George Gibson to Ponca villages, believed to be near the Ponca Creek and the mouth of the Niobrara. The privates, though, reported that the people were away hunting buffalo and had not planted their gardens. The absence of crops suggested perhaps some distress, possibly even fear of incursion from neighboring less friendly tribes, perhaps Sioux. At least one of their former heavily fortified villages apparently had been abandoned altogether. When defending the Indians' right to free movement inside and out of their reservations, Ponca Chief Standing Bear lifted his right hand and told federal judge Elmer Dundee,
"That hand is not the color of yours, but if I pierce it, I shall feel pain. If you pierce your hand, you also feel pain. The blood that will flow from mine will be of the same color as yours. I am a man. The same God made us both."
The judge agreed. Before Lewis and Clark, few Europeans penetrated these vast prairies, the North Missouri Plains, stretching across much of today's South and North Dakota, the eastern part of Wyoming, and part of eastern Montana. Mostly French and British voyeurs, filtering up the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, or down from Canada, were busy harvesting furs of the buffalo, beaver, otter, and other furry creatures, then hauling them down the Missouri and Mississippi in canoes to trading hubs like St. Louis, Memphis, and New Orleans. These rough entrepreneurs, preceding the surge of the 19th century mountain men, sometimes married native Indian women, lived in the indigenous villages for a time, and could speak or sign language in the local dialects. Several corps of Discovery crew and members had been acquired from this class of early adventurers in the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase, primarily because of their river navigating skills and, importantly, their ability to communicate with the Indians. The Sioux tribal communities more or less ranged from present-day central Canada to the Platte River, from Minnesota to the Yellowstone River, including the Powder River hunting grounds shared with Cheyenne and Crow. Several Indian groups of the West were referred to at times as horse nations, and the northern Sioux tribes were one of them, like the Cheyenne of the Central Plains and the Comanche of the Southern Plains. The Oceti-Sakowin, or People of the Seven Council Fires, are an alliance of smaller subtribes who speak three related Sioux language dialects: the Dakota-speaking Santee, or Eastern Dakotas, the Nakota-speaking Yangton, Western Dakotas, and the Lakota-speaking Teton Sioux, Lakotas. The actual Nakota today are considered to be the Assiniboine, or Stoney, living in western Canada and Montana. before their communities drifted west, or were forced there, away from the Lake Superior region, now Wisconsin and Minnesota, the Sioux Sioux were notably a woods people. They also were feared there. Massacre Island, an unverified site of a notable historical event in the 18th century, is in Lake of the Woods on the border with Canada. Here a group of Sioux reportedly massacred a party of French explorers. The Sioux Narrows area on the lake is named after the Sioux presence in the region. The earliest name for the lake, Des Bois, was given by Jean-Baptiste de la Vérendrye in an exploring journey in 1731. On June 6, 1736, a party of more than 20 French explorers, including a priest led by Vérendrye, were massacred by Lakota and Dakota and some Ojibwe warriors on the island in Lake of the Woods. The French had made a new alliance with Cree enemies of the Dakotas, and these Sioux were not happy about that. More than a century later, while the Civil War was raging, another Sioux massacre in 1862 triggered Army and settler revenge fever that spread across the northern plains for another several decades. The Minnesota Massacre was a spark to the Plains Indian Wars that didn't essentially subside until Lieutenant Colonel George Custer's last stand at the Little Bighorn, a place called by the Indians Greasy Grass River. The end of revolt among northern tribes followed the bloody reprisal of the U.S. military, called Wounded Knee. That history remains to be told later. In the 1860s, many Santee Sioux were already confined to a narrow reservation in Minnesota. A mere small incident, or misunderstanding, depending on interpretation of events, set off a long simmering anger among the native people deprived of their cultural norms. The result? At least 450 settlers in the region killed by Indian bands, encouraged by Chief Little Crow. Eventually, thousands of Indians surrendered, men, women, and children confined to concentration camp-like conditions. Almost 400 Sioux warriors were tried, and more than 300 sentenced to death. President Abraham Lincoln commuted the sentences of most, but 38 Sioux were hanged at the same instant, the day after Christmas, 1862. February 1863, Congress passed an act that, quote, abrogated and annulled all treaties with the Dakota people. All lands held by the Dakota and all annuities due to them were forfeited to the U.S. government. Another law providing for the removal of the Dakota from their ancestral homelands passed the next month. In early May, the Army put the Dakota captives from the Fort Snelling camp aboard steamers and took them to a reservation at Crow Creek, Dakota Territory. This episode of treachery and revenge and punishment would repeat itself across North America for years. The warrior chief, Shakopee, or Little Six, who initially escaped the Army's grasp, reportedly declared before the drop finally killed him at Fort Snelling, quote, "As the white man comes in, the Indian goes out." Beside him, Medicine Bottle also swung from the gallows. Little Crow later was ambushed by a solitary farmer and shot. In windy conditions, the Lewis and Clark Expedition's keelboat and two pirogues on August 28 approached the White Bear Cliff, today named Calumet Bluff, across from present-day Yangton, South Dakota. A snag punched a hole in the red pirogue and it nearly sank. Repairs began while the party prepared for the first council with the Yangton Sioux. At about this time also, Private John Coulter was sent out to find one of their missing hunters, Private Shannon, and horses. Shannon would be discovered roughly 2 weeks later sitting along the riverbank, waiting to be rescued by someone or anyone. The first council with the Sioux was held with some friendly Yanktons on August 30 through August 31. For some days before the meeting, the captains had been expecting to meet the Sioux. On August 25, to no avail, the explorers set fire to the prairie as a signal for the tribe to come to the river. Two days later, near the mouth of the James River, 3 Yanktons did appear. That same day, Sergeant Pryor, Dorian, and a French boatman set out about 9 miles up the James to invite tribal representatives to a council. The boaters camped along the south bank of the Missouri on the plain, just below the hill, and southeast of the Niobrara confluence. Late the following day, Sergeant Pryor's group arrived on the opposite bank with 5 chiefs and 70 men and boys, as well as old Dorian's son who lived with the Yanktons. Captain Clark observed,
"The Sioux is a stout, bold-looking people. The young men handsome and well-made. The greater part of them make use of bows and arrows. Some few fusées I observe among them. The warriors are very much decorated with paint porcupine quills and feathers, large leggings and moccasins, all with buffalo robes of different colors. The squaw wore petticoats and white buffalo robes with the black hair turned back over their necks and shoulders.
According to Clark, the nation is divided into 20 different tribes composed of 2,000 to 3,000 men, with maybe 40 French, British traders mixed in. He even saw resemblances between members of all the indigenous tribes encountered so far: the Sioux, Omaha, Ponca, Osage, and Kansa. Dorian served as translator for deliberations that began at noon on August 30 and continued throughout the day and all the next. A flag gift and medals awarded were part of the speech-making and other exchanges of goods that would become customary during the ensuing journey to the Rockies and beyond. In the evening, the warriors performed their war dance around the fires. Quote, "It always began with a whoop and a hollow, and ended with the same," according to Ordway. There were also shouts proclaiming many kills, and coups, and horses stolen. On September 1, the expedition departed. Dorrien stayed behind to negotiate peace among the tribes and to persuade some of the chiefs to visit Washington, D.C. The party of travelers camped at the mouth of the Niobrara River on September 4.